o'clock. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Manager Williams, could you call the roll of council members?
Yes. President Ribis. See you're present.
Here.
Councilperson Shane Hendricks is absent due to a work situation that he had to cover. Councilperson Farrell. Here. Councilperson Carroll.
Present.
Councilperson Meese. Here. Councilperson Charles. Here. Councilperson Knapp. Here. Mr. President and other members of council. Other persons present this evening include Mayor Jeff Reed, Junior Councilperson Jonah Markle, Solicitor Robert Kravitz, Assistant Borough Manager and Treasurer Sharon Badman, Borough Manager Paul Williams, Administrative Assistant and Recording Secretary Shelley Weaver. You do have a quorum with 5 members present this evening, Mr. President.
6. I think we have 6.
Thank you. Mr. Knapp. I'm sorry.
Let's take a moment for silent reflection and prayer. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to begin this evening by recessing to a public hearing at this hour on the use of the fiscal year 2016 CDBG funding. I think we have a presentation by Glenda.
We're close. Good evening, Council. I am not Glenda Rook. She has markedly less facial hair than I. Glenda will not be here this evening. Terry and I are here for another agenda item from SEDA-COG, and so I gave Glenda the evening off and said I would cover the hearing. She chuckled because she wasn't sure I was still able to do this, but I'll give it a try. For the benefit of the public, this is the first public hearing for Selinsgrove Borough's Community Development Block Grant Program. The Block Grant Program is a program that originates with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. It passes through the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development and to Selinsgrove Borough in the form of a federal entitlement grant. The program has been around many, many years. It's been an entitlement grant through the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for over 35 years now. And each year the borough receives an allocation of funds. They go through a public process to identify projects for the use of the funds, ultimately selecting projects and then submitting the application to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for approval. This evening is the first step in that process. It is a public hearing. What we're going to do in the hearing this evening is we're going to talk about the requirements of the program, what kind of activities are eligible and fundable, some regulatory obligations and announcements that the council has, and then finally review the council starting of the community development plan, identifying and discussing projects. With that background, the funds available this year for Selinsgrove Borough are $96,514. And this year the funds pass through the county, so there's another entity. They actually come from HUD to DCED to Snyder County to Selinsgrove Borough. The application schedule is attached to the agenda. If you didn't pick one up, I'll summarize the key actions. This evening is, as I said, our first hearing to talk about the requirements of the program and the activities that are eligible for consideration. And maybe most important is September 6th at the regular meeting. The council will take formal action to select projects for funding out of the federal fiscal year 2016 program. That is a recommendation that is then made to the county commissioners, and the actual projects selected by the borough will be included in the county's application for submittal to DCED. The action by the county commissioners is scheduled for September 27th at 10 a.m. at the commissioner's boardroom, and then finally the application is submitted to the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development on November 18th. So what I'll do now is talk a little bit about the kinds of activities that are eligible and then what some of the criteria are for funding. In general, broad areas of community and economic development are eligible under this program. Water, sewer, roads, bridges, housing rehabilitation, curbing, handicap accessibility, curbs, streets, sidewalks, all of those kinds of projects are eligible, as are economic development activities, public service activities, recreation. Generally, the best way to remember what you can't do with CDBG funds is just that. Remember the things that are ineligible, and there really are very few of those. The first is you cannot use these funds for general purpose government. You can't buy borough trucks, you can't build the building we're in. They're intended for undertaking community development activities. The second thing you can't do is you cannot do general and routine maintenance. You can't paint sidewalks or curbs or street lines, things like that. You can reconstruct a street, you can reconstruct a stormwater that exists, but you can't do general maintenance. Generally speaking, if you remember those prohibitions, most other activities are eligible. That's not the challenge in this program. The challenge in this program is we have to meet one of 3 federal national objectives in order to use the funds. Those 3 objectives are as follows. Most frequently we use low and moderate income benefit. 51% of the individuals who benefit from the investment of these funds must be low and moderate income in order to qualify the project. Generally speaking, we have to look at what the service area is, and then we have to determine who the beneficiaries are. That often requires surveying, and in fact, Selinsgrove Borough is in the process of an income survey right now as we speak to qualify projects here in the borough. Additionally, in addition to the low and moderate income benefit threshold, there are 2 others you can meet. One is the second one is the elimination of slums or blight. If the borough determines that there is a blighting influence on the community, dilapidated structure, they can do spot or neighborhood blight elimination, where they can acquire properties and demolish the structures. About 30% of these funds may be used for that, and 70% of the funds must go to projects that benefit low and moderate income persons. And then the third criteria, the third national objective, is urgent need. It's a very limited application of these funds. Generally, it will result in a gubernatorial declaration before these funds are eligible to be used under urgent need, and the council would need to show that it does not have the revenues to pay for that project from within their own general funds. Very limited application. Generally speaking, you're going to qualify your projects. Once you select an eligible project, you're going to look at low and moderate income benefit for that activity. Before I go into some of the discussions or regulations, I'll pause and see if there are any questions from any members of council or the public. Yes?
Could these funds be used like to help our community pool acquire equipment, or the senior citizen center, or soon the new community recreation center? Is those kind of projects would qualify?
All 3 of those would be eligible activities. The challenge will be the low and moderate income benefit, and I'll take them one at a time. The senior citizen center, elderly seniors are presumed to benefit predominantly low and moderate income, so that project clears both hurdles relatively easily. The recreation facility, we would need to look at who uses that facility. Does it serve a portion of the borough, all of the borough, more than the borough? And then we would need to assess the low and moderate income ratio of those users. On recreation projects, that can be very simple. If it's a little neighborhood pocket park, you can define it pretty clearly. If it's a community kind of facility, it becomes much more difficult. Same is true with the pool. Recreation is eligible. The challenge with the swimming pool project is who are the users, who are the beneficiaries. And DCED has actually waffled on that over the years. At one time, we could argue that if it was funded entirely by the municipality, the municipal residents were the borough. In recent years, they've said we need to take a look beyond that and look at who might have memberships and who might come in from outside the area. So all 3 are eligible. All 3 have their own challenges related to low and moderate income benefit. Any questions from the public thus far? All right, the next thing I'd like to do is just talk about some of the regulatory requirements of the program. that the council is responsible for, and those are also attached to your agenda this evening. I won't read them, but I will just touch on the key ones. The first one is the fair housing notice. Snyder County Commissioners, as well as the Borough of Selinsgrove, have committed themselves to fair housing within the community and has established a formalized complaint process within the county, as well as designating a place where complaints can be filed. That complaint process and notice is attached to the agenda and distributed this evening. The second regulatory item I want to review is the Anti-Displacement and Relocation Assistance Plan. And that's a federal requirement that if council were to use these funds to acquire properties that are occupied or occupiable by low and moderate income persons, the council has an obligation to replace that housing within its own community. You cannot displace low and moderate income people with these funds. And the rationale for that is that these funds are intended to benefit low and moderate income people. If you displace them from your community to another, you've not benefited. If you take housing, you've not benefited. So that's the rationale behind that. The borough and the county have adopted such a policy. They do have an anti-displacement plan. It is attached. The next obligation of the council and the county is to consider the 504 handicap accessibility requirements. Most of us think of that as the American with Disabilities Act. Section 504 actually of the federal regulations predates the American with Disabilities Act, and so the council is actually bound by both 504 and ADA. Under the 504 program, one of the things that we do when we undertake CDBG activities is we look at accessibility, and in fact the council has invested its funds over the last several years in doing curb cuts and improving accessibility here in the borough, and that is a continued need within the borough under the 504 plan. So that's one of the things that are taken into consideration as we identify projects. And then last but not least, we're required to announce a Section 3 preference. Excuse me. A Section 3 preference, and what that refers to is Section 3 of the federal guidelines of this program requires the council and the county to give consideration to low and moderate income businesses and individuals as they undertake their projects. The rationale behind that is if we're going to invest federal tax dollars in benefiting low and moderate income people, and we're going to principally build projects through that process, we ought to offer the opportunity for the work or the contract to low and moderate income persons. So that's one of the requirements of the Section 3 program, and it's based on income for both individuals and small businesses. Any questions on any of the regulatory pieces? Okay. The real heart of this evening's hearing, I want to talk about the previously funded projects. I want to talk about new project proposals that we're aware of, as well as to invite any from the public, and then also talk about any particular impacts of those projects. Historically, the Borough of Selinsgrove has invested its CDBG funds in a number of areas. Most of those areas, however, have been improvement of handicap accessibility by the installation of handicap accessible ramps at sidewalks, and also providing direct assistance to low and moderate income homeowners with curb and sidewalk replacements as part of street projects. That has historically been the focus of council, and those are the projects that have historically been funded over the past few years. This year, again, council has identified that as a priority for consideration for the federal fiscal year 2016 program. So the proposal, at least at this point in time, is to reinvest CDBG funds in continuing the curb ramp program, as well as the low-income homeowner sidewalk and curb program. At this point, I would open it to council for any discussion of those project ideas or suggestions of other projects. Hearing none, I would turn to the public and ask if there are any questions about projects or any proposed projects. Okay, last thing I have to do is ask if any members of council or the public are aware of any historical or environmental impacts that we should take into consideration as we move forward to identify either the projects we've talked about or any other projects that might be discussed this evening. Public or council? Hearing none, I would ask the chair to adjourn the hearing and proceed with the regular meeting.
Thank you. We'll report to Glenda that you still have it, Mr. Seaborn.
Thank you. She won't believe it.
We will close the hearing at this time at 7:15. Resume our public meeting. Members have in their packets the minutes of the meeting of July the 5th. Are there any additions or corrections?
I make a motion that we accept these as presented.
Okay, move. Second? And second. No discussion. All in favor, give your consent by saying aye.
Aye.
Carries. Persons to be heard in public comment, period. With the consent of the members of council, I'd like to move one item in the agenda up and take it at this time. This meeting tonight, I believe, is the last meeting for our junior council member, Jonah, and he's going to be missed. We have prepared a resolution that I'm going to ask our borough manager if you would kindly read.
Yes, I would. Mr. President, other members of council, this resolution is prepared for your consideration this evening and adoption. Resolution number 2016-7. Selinsgrove Borough, Snyder County, Pennsylvania. A resolution to acknowledge the service of junior councilperson Jonah Markle. Whereas Jonah Markle was sworn in as the appointed junior councilperson of the Selinsgrove Borough Council on September 3rd, 2013. Whereas Jonah has provided a community service to the general public through his attendance and involvement during monthly business meetings. Whereas Jonah has participated in discussions of local importance, especially those pertinent from the perspective of a young adult. Whereas Jonah has announced his intention to attend Duquesne University, specifically, I understand, the School of Business. Upon graduation from Selinsgrove High School, where he achieved a distinguished academic record. Therefore, be it resolved that the mayor, borough council, and staff hereby acknowledge the adventurous and energetic enthusiasm for politics and social issues that Jonah is said to read about, watch, and discuss during his tenure, and collectively wish him Godspeed and success in future endeavors. Resolved and adopted this first day of August 2016.
Thank you. The floor is open for a motion to adopt this resolution. I'll make the motion.
I second.
And seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, give your consent by saying aye.
Aye.
Carries. I'd like to. It's your framed resolution and also your names are added.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Borough Council, very much. It's been a pleasure.
Closely related to this, again, advancing it on the agenda with your approval, we have a vacancy in the position of junior council member, and I believe it's from Jonah Markle, a recommendation, and I have interviewed by phone and just recently in person an applicant. We'll call her a candidate. Her name is Isabella Moles, and she's here this evening. So, Isabella, would you kindly rise and kind of introduce yourself to the members of council?
Sure. Do I go over there?
Yes, please. That's how we record on our tape.
I could tell you all about me, but that takes 17 years, so I won't do that. I moved here about a year ago, and I'm currently going to rise as a senior at Selinsgrove Area High School, which I'm really excited to graduate from. In the past year, have volunteered with Selinsgrove Chambers of Commerce and have enjoyed every second of it. I am currently in about 5 clubs. I've been in tennis, swim team, track and field, and it's been my goal to kind of get involved in the community and find a problem that I really like to fix, such as make this place a little bit more accessible to handicaps and stuff like that. That's one of my goals. And I don't know, does anyone else have questions for me that could help?
Well, are there members of council who would like to ask Ms. Mills a question? Well, you stunned them in silence. Thank you, Isabella. We're probably going to entertain a motion at this time concerning this. So why don't you return to your seat? Thank you.
No problem.
We appreciate you stepping up to the plate.
Is there a motion in this regard from members of council?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Moved. Second by Tim. The motion is to appoint Isabella Knowles as the junior council representative with her official function to begin at the next council meeting in September. Move second. No discussion. All in favor, give your consent by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations.
I just pointed out that the mayor might do swearing in either prior to or at the next meeting for her. Has to be done, okay?
Thank you. This brings us to other matters that have come before the council, beginning with the DH&L report.
Good evening. I'm Brandon North, Deputy Fire Chief. We've had 31 calls for service in the month of July. We had 7 of them in the borough alone. Everything else was surrounding municipalities. We also had a dollar loss of approximately $100. That was in Penn Township. Other than that, we currently got accepted for a federal grant, approximately $150,000 for new SCBA air packs. Our air packs are all currently outdated, are starting to show their age and means becoming a problem. So we are currently on board right now with getting new air packs. We're going to get between 18 and 20 of them for our fire apparatus. They will obviously keep our members safer. With that $150,000, we also got approved for some water rescue equipment. I'm not exactly sure what that is slated in the grant yet, but we are currently working on that right now. Also, we are doing some other fundraisers and stuff. We are currently doing a gun raffle just for extra towards this grant. Because we do have to pay, I believe it is 10% out of our pockets with this grant for the funding, to receive the funding. But other than that, right now, we're also currently always looking for new members. If there's anybody out there they're looking for a thrill, even if it's just helping with fundraisers, or we'll train you to go into a burning building. But we're constantly looking for new members. Any questions?
Thank you, Brad. Questions?
Is the 150 going to cover all the packs you need?
Yes,
So that will cover everybody or anybody coming in?
yeah, that we only have our packs for the fire apparatus. Nobody gets a personal fire. Nobody gets a personal one.
Okay.
But that's
So that should cover it.
federal grant.
I didn't quite follow. You said 10% had to be set aside for what purpose?
When whatever money you were awarded, you have to pay. Chuck, you 10%. Yeah.
A match.
Yeah, we have to match 10% of the grant.
Match.
Thank you, Sherry, for clarifying that.
Okay.
This is my first grant, so.
Keep up the good work.
But we're working on that.
Other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
In the packets, we had minutes from following organizations, Selinsgrove Projects for their June meeting, from the Selinsgrove Chamber of Commerce from its June meeting. Mr. Lee, is there any report on the pool?
Well, the only thing to report on is we have 3 weeks left in our season. We were kind of hoping that we'd be able to stay open a little longer than that, maybe through Labor Day weekend, but the lack of lifeguards is deterring that situation. We've had the whole area, you know, Sunbury, Norrie, Lewisburg, Selinsgrove, Middleburg, everybody has an issue with getting lifeguards. So we're working with the YMCA now to have lifeguard classes next year at Selinsgrove Pool so that we can help every pool in the area, you know, fulfill the lifeguards.
Well, school resumes classes on the 25th of August?
Our last day is the 20th.
20? Brings us to Parks and Recreation. Megan Moore.
There are only a few things to bring to the council's attention. We are working on preparing for Little Norway too, which is kind of strange given that it's almost 90 degrees outside. But one of the issues, and I think I mentioned this last time, was that the skates that we have there, which anyone can come and use for free, are breaking. The blades are breaking. And Walt, our volunteer and board member, has told us it's because they're not being tightened correctly. So we are working on a sign, which I would bring to you to let you know and to seek endorsement on, to encourage people to tighten the laces. And Walt is also looking into a lace tightener. Is that what it's called?
Something like that, yeah.
It's a really
It's just a handheld hook that you pull.
yeah, it just helps you pull the laces up. But I think a lot of the people who come aren't familiar with the reason. I mean, they wear their shoes open and sort of sloppy laced, and so they don't know that it's necessary to keep the laces tight. The skates themselves cost about $50, so it's just almost impossible to replace, and it's better to sort of do prevention and help people keep them tight. The board also discussed the GoFundMe donation, and Paul was going to go ahead and order the snow blower that we had agreed on and had approved by council, and then work on the next phase, which is the pump, the water pump, to bring water into the area so it will freeze. So I'm not looking forward to it, sorry. Everything else is going well. I think you have Mackenzie's report on Summer Parks program. This Saturday, this coming, is Ecology Day at the river, at the boat launch. There's a session at 9 and a session at 1. And they're free and open to the public. And there's also free lunch at noonish, which my kids are serving. So if you want some fun just for that, come down for lunch. But there'll be a lot of interesting and educational activities for the kids to learn about how to enjoy the rivers and also how to protect it. The one other thing that was in the minutes from last time, which would have been 2 months ago, was the sign in Anthony Sealand Park. There is a new sign, a brand new one, which we have budgeted for, and it's on the Kidsgrove side of the driveway, which doesn't seem to be an issue with Kidsgrove. They haven't complained. There's another sign that's in the dog park itself that belonged to the Anthony Sealand Park itself from a long, long time ago. And it was created by a volunteer from the community. So, but it's becoming dilapidated and even unsafe. And the board has been discussing kind of what to do about the sign, what to do with the sign. And so what we've come up with is, per Shane Hendrick's advice, to remove the sign and save the big board part, and put it in the pavilion in a place that would look good and be where people could see and sort of appreciate, and then completely remove the sign posts and all of the apparatus that goes with it, and potentially move the Anthony Sealand sign to the other side of the dog park, not inside the dog park, but just alongside, so people sort of reduce the confusion between what is Kidsgrove and what is Anthony Sealand, because they're actually, having been on the Kidsgrove board, there is a lot of that. People think the whole thing is Kidsgrove, or they don't know. So on that board, there's a stabilizing board at the bottom, which needs to be there. I think it has 911 address information on it. And we're going to add a second one with information about Summer Parks program, so that when people want to participate in that and are instructed to drive up Sassafras Street and they don't know where to look, they'll see that sign and say, this is where to go, and they'll make the turn. All that to say is just that all of those things are in the works. But that brings me to the other sign issue. We had in the budget for 2016 approved 3 new signs to be created and installed. I'm not sure if we've gotten started on any of them, but the board voted on the one for Little Norway 2 at our last meeting. I say voted in a broad term, we kind of just agreed. With Borough Manager Paul's suggestion that we make it slightly smaller than the rest because of its proximity to the street and because of the building that it's next to. It's just because of the aesthetic, that it would look better as a smaller sign. The kayak launch is a big one, and it's not that much smaller, it's just slightly, but it's very close. It's just around the corner. So this would just kind of make it look better and still be noticeable, still be with keeping in the tradition of all the signs that we're having made, so they all look similar to each other. And the icon on this sign would be a pair of ice skates. This is what the board has agreed. So I'm sure Paul can walk through the process of getting it ordered and ready to install. The sign at the Tree Museum, which was purchased and funded by Shade Tree Commission, has been installed. And I suggest that you take a look if you're ever out there, because it just adds to our community. It adds a great deal of beauty, and the cohesion is great to see. But the signs are all similar. They're all within the same theme. I think that's all I have for you, except to just say one more time, please come to Ecology Day on Saturday. Ecology Day sounds like it's not super fun, but it really is. My kids had a blast last year, just learning more than they like to catch crayfish and minnows all the time, but this time they got to learn about how can you tell a boy crayfish from a girl crayfish. So all kinds of good stuff. You can, yes.
Thank you. Unless there are any questions, thank you very much, Mayor. Others in attendance who'd like to be heard at this time? If not, we'll go into our committees and commissions. Finance and Budget Committee report, Mr. Charles.
The Finance Committee met at 1 o'clock today, and we reviewed all the bills, and there was nothing unusual. And I make a motion that we pay the bills as presented.
I'll second that.
All in favor, give your consent by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
There are no statewide tax exonerations this month. And the only other item is just to acknowledge your receipt of the 2015 audit. And if anyone has any questions, it takes a while to look it over, but if anyone has any questions, there were no findings, which is the good news on our audit.
No critical comment.
And that's it for the Finance Committee.
All right, thank you. Brings us to Public Facilities, Shane Hendricks, but he is flying, so he won't be delivering a report tonight. Borough Administration, Mr. Carroll.
Nothing.
A report tonight. Community Activities and Public Affairs, Mr.
Now we have one request from Susquehanna University to hang the Welcome Home sign across Market Street. This is an annual event that we do, so I make a motion that we approve this.
I second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, give your consent by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
I do have one other thing I'd like to bring up. I was contacted a few days ago about specific traffic on Broad Street traveling at a high rate of speed. And I was hoping that person would be here tonight. They weren't able to be here. So I'd like to bring it to the forefront for everybody to at least think about something to resolve the speed on Broad Street, how we may be able to stop. This is a safety factor in front of the high school. Yes.
Whoever those people are that are reporting this information, could you get back to them and tell them to try to be more specific? Time of day, color and or make of car, and if they can get license plate number. In the past, Tim Charles was notified by a resident on Broad Street about an early morning speeder. Our police have arrested that individual for speeding at 50 some miles per hour at 35 or 25 at 6:30 in the morning. So,
Yeah,
it can be taken care of, but we need to know more specifics. It's 24 hours of the day. When's it primarily happening? So this person, told Tim at 6:30 in the morning. The chief met with him, and we finally caught the individual. So.
And well, I also thought that we could consider the possibility of maybe putting a stop sign up somewhere, near the high school, just to, help in slowing traffic down the hill. That's not the resolution to the problem, but, it is in front of the high school. There's a lot of kids there, and, it's just something we ought to be thinking about. That may not be the route to go, but, if we all think about it and then, move forward somehow on it. But I'll look into, find out when this is happening.
It's not just, it's Pine Street too, it's everywhere. It's out here. It's- And I know the major issue is that this red light is so long, and people see it's green coming across the bridge, and they try to hurry up to get to it. Because it's so long, and that's out of our control. That's state that would decide what the timing is. And then it's the all red if someone hits their crosswalk, and it's so long as they typically cross before they get the walk sign. But then every direction is red, and no one's crossing the street then. So, but I know that's what the problem is with Pine Street.
Also, I believe the chief had contacted Paul about having the borough crews put some lines down in certain areas where they can do some speed monitoring by timing. So, I mean, that's also something in the process. I'm not sure the locations, but
There's lots of stuff. You do the slow head zone like in Lewisburg coming into Market Street. There's paintings you can do that make it look like speed bumps without actually having speed bumps, but the visual of it when you're driving, it's just human nature to slow down, which I think they're pretty nifty because they work pretty good. Or even the stanchions, which I think the school has already. They have the things they put out in the middle.
Channeling devices.
Well, for the yield of pedestrian.
well, before school and after,
Right,
they have guards
They
there.
put them up in the morning and then they take them down in the afternoon.
right.
That's all.
Thank you. Brings us to personnel, which was our junior council person, so that's already dealt with. Public Safety Committee, Mr. Neff.
Nothing to report.
Planning Commission, did they meet this month?
They did have a meeting. Discussion items include continuation of consideration of a professional for planning consultant for the comprehensive plan. Also, there was some discussion on some potential ordinances to be considered. One of them you might be interested is the keeping of bees or aviaries in the borough. So they're still a subject of discussion, but nothing to recommend to you tonight.
Interesting. We need bees, but I'm not sure I want them next door. Zoning Hearing Board, they have a meeting coming up.
There is a meeting this Thursday, August the 4th. It's a property on the other side of Snyder Street from the Episcopal Church. Involves potentially the demolition of that, should I say, dated structure being replaced by another residence, and it's a change in use from a non-conforming use to another non-conforming use. So that's this Thursday at 7 o'clock.
Next, Civil Service Commission, I don't think they've had any meeting. Shade Tree Commission, we have minutes in the packet from their July meeting. Brings us to Borough Administration reports, beginning with Mayor Jeff Reed.
No reports at this time.
Borough Solicitor, Robert Kravitz.
We have Mr. Siegel present tonight with regard to the request from DB Construction for a waiver. And I was, given that this may involve potential litigation, we should go into executive session just to discuss that briefly. That's a question we should not address in the public. It would involve any kind of litigation.
We can do that at the end. Sure. You also can bring us up to date on Gilnet.
We received an answer from the trustee, Mr. Wagenslager, through his attorney. regard to their account. The next step in this will be a hearing in front of Judge Hudock, which has not yet been set, which will go over the deficiencies we thought were present, in which they felt was not a deficiency enough to warrant the appointment of the auditor. We also received a letter of interest from the Trust Division of Northumberland National Bank from Julie Roddicky with regard to Northumberland National Bank volunteering to be the sole trustee with regard to the Gilman's Trust. So we're having some interest there.
And at a lower rate.
And that will probably, if anything, result in the judge taking a look at this and maybe opening that up to a bidding process. And that would be one thing the borough had discussed and would be requested. And then escrow, we're going to have a meeting sometime, I think, August 19th to discuss our mutual differences, but the litigation still proceeding.
All right. And we'll have an executive session at the end of the meeting.
I'll be very brief. And we'll come back.
All right. Borough engineer has included in your packet some reports on current projects. Nothing special on that. Borough treasurer, Sherry Beck.
Everybody has a copy of the treasurer's report for period ending July 31st. If you have any questions, let me know.
Make a motion to accept.
I second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, give your consent by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
The September 2016 newsletter is in process. Any articles or ideas should be to Shelley by August 19th to be included.
Keep those articles coming. We need another word. Thank you. Brings us to the borough manager report, Mr. Williams.
Thank you. You do have a report from myself. I just want to highlight a couple of them and go into the bottom of the Chief of Public Works Department. Well, you know, they've been involved in the summertime activity. I just saw the evening news tonight. I believe that this July is the 5th warmest on record for Harrisburg area, Lancaster area. So it has been hot for those all men as well. They did assist the different organizations with some fun traffic control, barricades and cones, you know, for the events that occurred, the Antiques on the Avenue, and the Hops, Wines, and Wines Festival, as well as the Top Knot Drive. So I'm sure that their assistance and need was appreciated. I want to acknowledge that a letter that you received a copy of, actually, Pastor Paul Doniger from All Saints Episcopal Church took time to write a letter of thanks, and specifically, mentioned Roger Feltzman and Richard Klein for the work that they did in conjunction with their contractor. You see the All Saints Episcopal Church is a rather historic structure, place of worship. There was an addition added on to called Parish House, and the two are connected by way of a bridge. And it seems as though when the contractor added on the Parish House, there's two water supplies to the building, one to the Parish House, one to the church. They failed to reinstall the valve box in order to control shutting off or turning on the water to the Parish House. So that was taken care of with the replacement of the sidewalk. And Reverend Doniger, thank you. At the Chamber of Commerce luncheon meeting, there was 4 guests there from PennDOT, and they were there at invitation really of your state representative, Fred Keller, to offer some information, albeit probably limited information right now on the Market Street resurfacing project, which they refer to as mill and fill. To distinguish it from that which occurred in Mifflinburg, which was a total restoration. And business person Matthew Vines from Keller's Beer was there. He really headed off the presentation. And with his concern, he's kind of leading the charge that he's hoping that Market Street is different than what he experienced on Water Street. Water Street in the year 2011 and 2012, we renewed some of the utility infrastructure, the water and the sewer. Storm probably was done in 2011, and then that area was also resurfaced. And his primary objection was really, I'm just going to say, focused on the 4th of July weekend, that he felt the untimeliness of the project was detrimental to his bottom line. So he's out there in front, and I know Councilperson Charles mentioned that the borough ought to get out in front of this project also and see what it can do in conjunction with PennDOT to limit the impact. Some more information to come. This past Thursday morning, the final inspection of the ornamental streetlights took place. Mr. Neff, I understand that there's now a 30-day period of, I'm going to say, trial of the...
There's a 168-hour burn, and that's when it's not on. They were on all the time last week because there's a 100-hour continuous burn, and now there's a 168-hour trial.
And the project closes somewhere around August the 26th. Now, this is a reimbursement grant. The borough was the recipient of money through the Transportation Alternatives Program to fund the construction inspection as well as the installation of these lights. But also, I just want to point out to you, just to remind you that $65,000 was put up by the Chamber of Commerce, and that was from past donations during phase 1 and phase 2 of the ornamental streetlights. And that $65,000 was to pay for, or partially pay for, the design and engineering of this phase 3. I think it really has made a difference in saving the illumination of northbound Market Street, as well as Pine Street to the Green Bridge. I think it looks excellent. Thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you. Zoning. Does anyone else here have any reports? No, we have in our packets the, I guess, the update on permits and such.
Yes.
No questions. Parks and Recreation. We have a report attached from McKinsey.
The college days is all Saturday with the rain date of next Saturday.
Selinsgrove Municipal Authority. I don't think they have a report, do they?
No. No meeting.
And Eastern Snyder County Regional Report. We have minutes from the June meeting here in your packet. And Long Range Planning meeting minutes from last month. And then the Northeastern Snyder County Joint Authority. This is really a closed landfill, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what that represents. They have to monitor this. I don't know how many decades after or anything might leach out of this landfill.
Yeah.
So they stay in existence long after it ceased to be used in that fashion. Okay. Brings us to new business. Any new business to be raised by council members? Not, Mr. Mayor? Any new business? Any others in the public like to raise any new business before we adjourn into our executive session? If not, it's now 7:48 p.m. We will recess this meeting to an executive session. The members of council are going to go into the inner room over there at the lunch table, if you will. And when we resume, we don't intend to take any action. So if you want to stick around and hear us adjourn, you want to do that one way.
Maybe a motion.
Oh, regarding the request.
Right.
Yes, okay, so I have something on that. But we don't think this will be a long recess. Time is 8:13 p.m. We will reopen the meeting, and we do have some action items, I believe.
No action was taken during the executive session.
Are there any motions to be made this evening?
Yes, in reference to the projects raising the 2 homes on the Isle of Jew. I make a motion to proceed with the project. Agreement to substitute from bond to letters of credit in the amount of 100% for payment and performance bond pursuant to satisfaction of the solicitor.
Irrevocable with letters of credit? Right?
Yes. Motion to proceed with project, agree to substitution from bond to irrevocable letters of credit in the amount of 100% for payment and performance bond to satisfaction of the solicitor.
I'll second
Okay, so this would be substituting 2 irrevocable letters of credit for the 2 bonds that were called for.
Yes. Both provide 100% coverage.
100%. Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, give your consent by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Any other motions?
I make a motion that we waive the warranty bond from 100% to 10% of the project for 2 years after project completion.
I'll second that.
God doesn't want us to do this.
Okay, we're changing our mind.
Did you get a second?
Moved and seconded.
I'm
Is there any discussion on this motion?
I second.
All in favor, give your consent by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Any other items?
Yes, we have one more item dealing with our health insurance premium. I make a motion to authorize the borough manager to commit to the borough health insurance at the lowest possible premium, authorizing him to sign the papers. We're in negotiations right now, and the paper has to be signed by September 1st, and our next meeting is until September 6th, so we have to authorize the signature today.
Moved and seconded. Please second. Discussion on this motion. All in favor, give your consent by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Any other business to come before the meeting? If not, stand adjourned.